Plant carrots too early and you can slice open a thick root with a pale, woody core. Plant them too late and frost catches them while they are still pencil thin. I used to think plant root crops in August solved that problem. It does not. Carrots and turnips in the same bed can need nearly twice the lead time, so one generic planting date can easily miss one of them. The fix starts with one number tied to your own yard. Count backward from it, and you get the planting week for any frost-prone U.S. garden. 5 different gardening channels told you to plant your root crops in August this year. Not one of them told you which August week, or whether August even applies to your zip code. So you did what anyone watching all 5 would do. You wrote down the same month, closed your laptop, and figured the details would sort themselves out on their own. They did not sort themselves out. Here is the part none of those hosts mention. Every one of them has the science right. Cold weather really does turn a bland carrot sweet, and a rushed one stringy and sharp. That part is not the problem. The problem is that August is not an instruction, it is a guess, built around whichever zone the host happens to garden in, then handed to you as if your backyard and their backyard freeze on the same night. The same questions reach me every fall, no matter which video someone watched. What zone are you in? Zone 8 and 9A, what can I plant? So what about the middle zones like 8A and 8B? Same question, different account, video after video that never actually answers it. 5 videos, 1 month, 0 specific weeks. Because a month is not a date. 31 days is more than enough room to plant carrots 3 weeks too early or 3 weeks too late. And neither mistake is small. 3 weeks early and the root sits in warm ground it never asked for, turning fibrous and sharp before it ever gets the chance to sweeten. 3 weeks can erase the crop. 3 weeks late and it is racing a frost line it cannot win, and there is no growing it faster once that clock starts. A woman wrote to me last fall, gardening in what she called Solid Zone 4, basically North Dakota cold. She had followed one of those popular August videos step by step. Same week the host mentioned, same seed variety, same watering schedule, same everything. Her host, it turned out, gardened somewhere close to Zone 8. By the time her carrots were finally sizing up in the ground, the soil outside had already gone hard as a sidewalk. She pulled finger-thin roots 2 weeks before her first real frost and never got a second chance that season. What stuck with her was not the wasted seed packet. It was standing in the garden with a handful of skinny orange roots, knowing she had done everything right, and it still had not worked. Because what she was told was never built for her yard in the first place. That is the part that should bother you more than it does. Following advice correctly is not the same as following advice that was ever meant for your zone. So if the month was never the problem, what actually is? And that mismatch, her zone, his calendar, is exactly why planted in August was never the real instruction. The real instruction was hiding under the ground the whole time. Here is what was hiding. Below about 41 degrees Fahrenheit, your carrot, your beet, and your turnip start doing something the calendar never mentions. Each root converts its stored starch into sugar. Sugar works almost like antifreeze in a car radiator. The more of it dissolved inside those cells, the harder it is for the liquid inside to freeze solid. Your root is running the same math, just to keep itself alive through the first hard nights of fall. That is the whole secret behind why a fall carrot tastes sweeter than a summer one. Not luck, not a special variety. Cold and sugar, doing exactly what they are built to do. You do not need a chemistry degree to use any of this. You just need the timing right, which is exactly where the 5 videos went quiet. Here is the part every one of those 5 videos skipped. That clock runs backward too, and it punishes you just as hard. Leave any of these 3 roots sitting in ground that is still summer warm, or rush them into the soil while the heat lingers. and the root spends its energy building tougher cell walls instead of storing sugar. Think of it as the plant stocking a bunker instead of stocking a pantry. Carrots respond by turning sharp-tasting, their roots going coarse and woody. Beet greens turn bitter, and the roots themselves toughen into something closer to fence post than food. Turnips can turn bitter, fibrous, and hollow inside. Bitter, fibrous, and hollowed out inside. What gardeners call pithy. 3 different vegetables, one shared punishment for growing in the wrong window. That is not a small inconvenience. That is the difference between pulling something sweet enough to eat raw right out of the dirt and pulling something you end up dumping on the compost pile. Here is what nobody puts together. The exact same cold that sweetens a carrot is the reason one calendar for millions of viewers could never fit 3 different root vegetables into a single date. The mechanism was never the mystery. Every one of those 5 channels got that part right. What none of them ever handed you was a number. I was looking through the University of Maryland Extension planting calendar one evening, coffee gone cold on the desk beside the laptop, and it did something none of those 5 videos had done. It did not say a month, it gave me a number of weeks, counted backward from my own first frost, not anybody else's calendar. Carrots need 10 to 12 weeks in the ground before that date arrives. Turnips need only 6 to 8. Beets sit in the middle. Start with the days to maturity on your packet. Add 2 weeks for slower fall growth, and treat 6 weeks before frost as the last edge, not the target. Read those 3 numbers side by side. Carrots at 10 to 12 weeks, turnips at 6 to 8. That is nearly double the lead time, sitting inside the exact same sentence every one of those videos used without blinking. Plant your root crops in August. 1 sentence. 2 entirely different clocks ticking underneath it, and a 3rd clock for beets running somewhere in between. The reason comes down to how each root grows on your own timeline. A carrot builds slowly, laying down its taproot inch by inch. A turnip swells fast once the weather turns cool. Beets sit between the two. So start with the slowest clock, which is always your carrot, and count backward from there. That is the whole formula, right there. Not a month, a countdown, counted backward from a frost date that belongs to your yard alone. A packet of carrot seeds costs less than a fast food value meal. Plant it the wrong week and that whole packet turns into compost. Plant it the right week and it is the sweetest thing sitting in your fall garden for the same handful of change. This is not a trick that works on every root vegetable either. Potatoes actually get worse with cold sweetening, not better, so leave this particular logic out of your potato bed. That is the formula in theory. Now zoom into your own backyard. Because carrots, beets, and turnips do not share the same countdown, not even close. Zoom in. Then, because your frost date matters more than any zone label, but the bands below show how wide that spread really is. Split the country into 3 practical groups and the picture gets a lot clearer. Cold zones, roughly 3 through 5, see their first frost land anywhere from mid-September to mid-October. Middle zones, 6 and 7, run later, early October through mid-November. Warm zones, 8 through 10, stretch into November and even mid to late December, with Zone 10 barely seeing a real frost at all. 3 ranges, 1 country. And not one of those 5 videos ever mentioned which range applies to you. That range is too wide for one planting date. Pick your group before you read any further, because everything else here only works once you know which one is yours. Now run the carrot countdown through each group. Since carrot carries the longest lead time of the 3, 10 to 12 weeks before frost. Cold zone gardeners are planting in roughly early July if you are on the cold side of that band, later if you are not. Middle zone gardeners land somewhere in mid to late July. Warm zone gardeners can wait until August, sometimes early September, and still get carrots sweet enough to eat raw right out of the dirt. Beets and turnips follow the exact same math, just with their own numbers attached. Roughly 8 to 10 weeks for beets, depending on your packet's maturity date, with 6 weeks standing as the hard cutoff. 6 to 8 weeks for turnips. Same formula, 3 different starting lines, running inside the same 4 feet of soil. Picture that bed for a second. 1 row of carrots, 1 of beets, 1 of turnips, and 3 completely different calendar dates written above each one. One more thing before you write anything down. Add 2 weeks of buffer to whatever date the countdown gives you. Shorter fall daylight slows growth compared to the same days to maturity number printed on a spring seed packet. Skip that buffer and you can do everything else right and still end up pulling roots that never quite finished sizing up. Thin and disappointing next to the ones you were promised. Fall steals time. For carrots, Danvers or Nantes are the workhorses, both suited to raised beds and containers where the soil is loose enough for a straight root. For beets, Detroit Dark Red is the classic main crop choice. Use the maturity date on your packet when you count backward. For turnips, you get a choice. Purple Top White Globe takes about 55 days, Hockeray takes only 35. Old-timers never trusted the zone color by itself. They watched where cold settled in their own yard. Here is the honest part. Those zone ranges are averages across an entire region, not a promise for your specific yard. Your actual first frost can swing 2 full weeks earlier or later depending on your microclimate. And a backyard sitting in a low spot can trap cold air a week ahead of a neighbor 3 streets over on higher ground. Do not just trust the zone number on a map. Look up your own zip code on a frost date calculator. Write that one date on your calendar and count backward from that number instead of a shared regional average. It takes 5 minutes, and it is the difference between a formula that works on paper and one that actually works in your soil. 5 minutes. That is the whole cost. If you have been circling the same date on your calendar for carrots, beets, and turnips because that is the day you always plant your fall garden, stop. That one date is only right for one of the 3, and the other 2 are either wasting weeks they cannot spare or sitting underground long after they were ready to come out. So if 3 root crops in the same 4-foot bed each want a different starting week, which one do you actually plant first? If this level of detail, actual weeks, not just a month, is what you have been looking for, subscribe and hit the bell. Every video, same level of specific. So if 3 root crops in the same 4-foot bed each want a different starting week, which one do you actually plant first? Simple answer, whichever root needs the most weeks goes in the ground first, every single time. That means carrots go first, since they need 10 to 12 weeks. Beets follow, needing roughly 8 to 10. Turnips go in last, needing only 6 to 8. Nobody picked that order because carrot starts with a C or because a seed catalog happened to list it first, and nobody picked it because carrots taste better or matter more than the other 2. Carrot goes first because its own countdown is the longest one running, and the longest countdown has to start the clock before anything else does. Picture the bed again, the same one from a minute ago. If you planted all 3 on the same afternoon out of habit, the carrot is already behind before it breaks the surface. Its clock needed a head start the other 2 never required, and no amount of extra watering or fertilizer buys that time back once it is gone. Here is the memory trick, and it does not need a spreadsheet or an app on your phone. Carrot needs almost double the head start that turnip does. Whichever root needs the most weeks, that is the one you touch first, every single fall, no matter your zone. Once that one rule sits in your head, you never have to look up all 3 numbers separately again. You just glance at the longest number and know exactly where to start, and the other 2 fall into line behind it. Take a breath here because none of this adds extra work to your fall. You are not buying another tool. You are not adding a step to your routine. You are only reordering 3 seed packets in your head before you touch a single one of them. And that reordering costs you nothing but a few seconds of thought. An old gardener I know, same corner of the country as me, has been growing food on the same plot for over 30 years. He never once looks at a calendar page in the fall. Inside his greenhouse, written on the wall in permanent marker, sits one date. Not this year's date on some app, his own average first frost, the same number he checks every single fall before he plants anything at all. He counts backward from that one number for every root he grows. No exceptions, no separate lookup for carrots versus beets versus turnips. One date. Permanent marker. He told me once, standing right next to that wall with a coffee in hand, that the ground does not read a calendar. It reads temperature, and it has been reading the same way on that plot since before either of us started keeping track. He is not doing anything you cannot do with a pencil and your own frost date. You do not need his greenhouse. You do not need 30 years behind you either. You just need his order of operations. Applied to your own backyard this fall, starting with whichever route on your own list needs the most weeks. I will be straight with you here. If your growing space is small and 3 separate countdowns will not stick in your head, anchor everything to the carrot date instead. Plant beets 2 weeks after that, and turnips 2 weeks after the beets. It is not the precise formula anymore, and a purist would tell you to track all 3 exactly, but it lands close enough to work. And close enough beats guessing every single time. In any zone, in any small backyard bed. 3 roots, 3 countdowns, 1 number to remember, your own first frost. Every calendar you have ever followed for this garden belonged to somebody else's yard. Yours has its own number. Find it once, and you never have to guess again. One more thing. If you miss your exact week by a little, do not panic and pull everything. A light frost usually will not ruin the roots, though the tops may show some damage. Pile on 3 or 4 inches of straw mulch right after that first frost. Where the ground stays workable, straw can extend the harvest. In colder zones, dig before a hard freeze locks the soil. So here is what to do next. Tonight. Not this season, tonight. Pull up a frost date calculator on your phone or computer and write down one date for your zip code. Count back 12 weeks for carrots, 10 for beets, 8 for turnips. Those 3 dates go straight onto your calendar, not next month's list, tonight's. The calendar is only paper. Your soil keeps the real time.